Chapter 27. The Man with Three Wives. If we are to talk of nagging wives, then how can we begin without mentioning the wife of Sidi Ahmad? She nagged like a blackberry bush which sinks sharp thorns into a man's skin. Every time he tries to move, the thorns tear and the pain grips him tighter. At the same moment that sunlight crept in under Ahmad's lashes, his wife's nagging blasted in at his ear, and it did not stop until he was out of earshot on his way to work. At night he went to sleep amidst as much peace as a man sleeping out in a hailstorm or curling up in a wasp's nest. "Must you spend so long time at work? Why don't you work harder? Then perhaps we could pay these bills. Have you seen these bills? No, of course not. You're too busy ignoring me. Don't pretend you don't ignore me. Have you said how pretty my hair is this evening, or complimented my cooking? No. Too idle to open your mouth, that's you. I don't know why anybody buys wood from a woodcutter who treats his wife so abominably. I wouldn't mind if I hadn't married beneath myself. My mother always said I deserved better. My mother knew something, and it's no good looking like that. I know you hate my mother, however much you deny it. I think a man who hates his mother-in-law doesn't deserve a good wife. Allah knows you don't deserve me." And so it went on, day in and day out. The only peace Ahmad enjoyed was in the green bowl of the forest, where even the birds flew away at the sound of his axe, and the only noise was of his breathing, his sweating, and his axe working. So when his wife complained that he spent too much time working and too little time with her, he saw his last pocket of happiness drop out of sight like money falling through the slats of a pier. "Yes, I shall come with you from now on and see that you keep hard at work and not lie around sunning yourself like the dog you are." He tried to dissuade her, but it was useless. She mounted his donkey and goaded them both ways into the forest. She pelted him with words as small boys pelt coconuts to bring them down from a palm tree. "What kind of a miserable forest do you call this? When are you going to start work? Can't you keep that donkey on the path? It brushed me against that tree. Didn't you hear me?" "Yes, dear," he said, but in his head he said, "O Allah, forgive me for shattering the silence of your quiet places, but why have you sent down this punishment? What have I ever done that deserved it?" An idea came to him, Allah alone knows where it dropped from, and he stopped the donkey. "My dear, since you have insisted on coming with me, I cannot keep secret the treasure I found yesterday. I was going to fetch it up today, sell it a little at a time, and bring home the money as if I had earned it by simple hard work." His wife, of course, beat him around the ears and demanded to see the treasure. "It's at the bottom of a deep, dry well over there. If you lower me down in the bucket, I shall fetch it up to you, dearest." But his wife pushed him aside. "Out of my way, you worthless object. You lower me into the well, and I shall inspect the treasure to see that none of it finds its way into the inn instead of into my housekeeping." Sighing many sighs, Ahmad helped his wife sit astride the bucket and lowered her down to the bottom of a well, then brushed his hands together and began work. "Allah hear me. I may die for this tonight when I pull her up again, but at least I shall have one last day of peace and pleasant solitude." When the tree's arms dropped the sun and it rolled over the evening horizon, Ahmad returned to the well and wound up the bucket. It was a damp, smelly well. His wife would be covered in rotting leaf mold and spiders, with possibly a toad or two in her pockets. "How I shall suffer for this," he groaned as he turned the handle. "But Allah be my witness, it was worth it." "Rescued! Name your reward," said a voice. "I'll give you a king's daughter to marry or a king's purse to empty." At the sight of the head emerging from the well, Ahmad dropped the handle, but the genie of the well clamped his huge teeth over the rim of the well and pulled himself out. "I'm a quiet soul," he said, hugging Ahmad warmly. "I've lived for hundreds of years down that well, minding my own business. But would you believe it? This morning someone lowered a dreadful woman down on my head in the bucket, and she has nagged me from that moment to this. My eardrums are ragged, my nerves are in tatters." And taking Ahmed under one arm and his donkey under the other, the genie flew as far away from the well as his brown magic would carry him. "Where are we?" said Sidi Ahmad. "I must be getting into town. I have firewood to sell." "China, I would say," replied the genie, "but there is still the matter of your reward for rescuing me from that woman's nagging." It was reward enough to be taken 3 continents away from his wife, so Ahmad only said in joking, I could not ask for gold from a stranger, and as for a king's daughter to be my wife, I fail to see how finding a wife could make a man happier than losing one. What? No beautiful face to look at you as you wake up? No delicate hand to prepare your favorite meals? No lash-lidded eyes to see all your good points and none of your faults? To persuade Ahmad of the delights of marriage, the genie carried him to the chandelier in the great hall of the palace of the Emperor of China. From there Ahmad could see all the faces of the women in the royal household and how well they treated their husbands. Sidi Ahmad at once fell in love with the emperor's only daughter, a single girl whose skin was the color of almond paste, whose eyes were the shape of almonds, and whose waist was as narrow as the almond tree. She was as different from his wife as the yellow jasmine is from the nettle. Since the commonest believer is allowed 4 wives in the wide-tented land of Arabia, Ahmad's heart turned towards the Chinese princess as a compass needle turns toward true north. I must marry her, friend Genie. Help me, or I shall die of ecstasy. It is harder to butter a slice of bread than for you to have this princess. Listen and obey. A handful of minutes fell like leaves from the tree of time. The Chinese princess was one moment playing bowls with her friends, and the next was lying on the ground under her cloud of hair. Her body was as stiff as the mast of a ship, and her arms stretched out like spars on either side. Her eyes were open, but scarcely a breath escaped her. The palace physicians were called, but they could do nothing. The heartbroken king of China ordered his whole palace to be painted black in mourning, and sent messengers along the length of China's great wall to search for doctors who could cure his daughter. Then Sidi Ahmad presented himself at the palace door, carrying a doctor's bag. I see that the palace is being painted black, and I hear that sickness is the reason. May I offer the knowledge of my country, which is wise in such matters as the sickness of princesses? On being taken to the princess's bed, Ahmad allowed himself the pleasure of feeling her pulse and laying a hand on her forehead, and then he rubbed his jaw sagely and said, There is no question about it. This young lady has been possessed by a genie. Such creatures roam about the world without tent or luggage, looking for a pleasant place to shelter out of the rain and wind. Look, I'll demonstrate. And he spoke to the wild-eyed, rigid princess, who up to that time had been as silent as the dead. Now, you old buzzard, you've chosen quite the wrong nest to winter in. Come out of there immediately. Ah, but it's so warm and cozy in here, replied the princess in a voice as deep as any mine. Hearing this, the king of China threw himself along the floor and begged Ahmad to tell him if there was any remedy. The princess growled, Do I have to go? Indeed you do, said Ahmed. Come on now, be off with you. You can see the distress you are causing these kind and honorable people. The princess's body made 3 somersaults, then cracked like a whip and fell limp on the bed. The genie of the well wreathed out of her nostrils in the form of smoke, and plunged through the wall, leaving an outsized hole shaped like a giant ifrit. Before the king had risen from the floor, the Chinese princess blinked her eyes and sat up as if from a heavy sleep. To be brief, the king's gratitude gave Ahmad his heart's desire. He was married to the Chinese princess, and she proved to be as sweet in temperament as she was sweet to look at. Now, whether Ahmad would have stayed in China and overlooked a certain package he had lowered into a certain well cannot be judged with certainty. It is related that he was still living comfortably in the Chinese palace when messengers arrived from India. They threw themselves at the king's feet. O King of the yellow seas and the jasmine-colored peoples of the world's greatest continent, we are messengers from the King of Ind, father of one dear daughter. Our king's palace has been painted black out of grief, for the king's only daughter has fallen sick with a strange sickness. News has reached us that your daughter was stricken with a similar sickness during the shining of the last moon, and that she was cured by a mighty physician from the western wildernesses. Ahmad guessed that his happiness was doomed before his father-in-law even spoke. Say no more, said the Chinese king, holding up one hand. I shall send the physician, who is now my son-in-law, to heal the princess of Ind. May your journey be speedy, for I know all too well how tightly the king's heart is clenched in sorrow. It was useless to say that the miraculous cure of the Chinese princess had all been a conspiracy to win Ahmad a pretty wife. The truth would rob him of his wife, and his head too. So, with his heart dragging behind him like a bent plowshare, Sidi Ahmad went to India with the messengers and was presented to the king of Ind. Cure my daughter, O physician of the western wilderness, O teacher among the wise, and you may have any reward up to half my kingdom, said the king. I shall try my best, said Ahmad, who, as a woodcutter, had less science in his head than an empty hazelnut and less courage in his heart than a coward. At first sight, however, he loved the Princess of Ind, a girl whose skin was the color of cane sugar, whose hair tangled like burnt spun sugar, and whose lips promised a sweetness more than sugar. "Oh, I am so sorry, Princess," he said when he was left alone with her. She could not hear him, of course, but he still felt he should say, "I would cure you if I had the art, but I have no knowledge of medicine. I am only a misguided rascal." "So they have sent for you, have they?" said the princess, in a voice as gruff as any lion. "How embarrassing for you, my friend! How very regrettable!" The voice of the genie of the well was instantly recognizable. "Come out of there, you rogue," said Ahmad, "or I shall be separated from my head within the hour." "Sorry, little woodcutter," said the genie. "It's very comfortable in here. This Indian princess is even more cozy than the Chinese girl." "Oh, please, friend genie, don't rob me of my life when it has just become pleasant for the first time." "Very regrettable, friend woodcutter," said the genie, "but I'm not leaving this little body, and that, my friend, is that." Sidi Ahmad went to the window, thinking to jump into the moat and run away. The king would be knocking at the door at any minute, expecting to find his daughter cured. How was Ahmad to persuade him not to behead the unfortunate physician who had failed to cure her? Voices drifted up to him on the sultry breeze. The cook and his wife were squabbling. The wife was a nagging. "Well, well, well, look who is coming," said Sidi Ahmad, peering down the road as if someone was approaching the castle. "Speaking of wells, do you remember how I rescued you from the tongue of that fearful woman who was lowered into your comfortable, peaceful, damp well? This seems the right time to admit to you. That woman was my wife, and rumors reached me in China that she had escaped from the well and was roaming the world in search of a certain genie. It seems that she fell desperately in love with this genie, having spent one day with him in a deep, dank well. I see that the rumors are true, for she has found her way here. Shall I not go and tell her that her search is over? Husband or not, I shall not object if she wishes to sit here beside you and talk to you day after day, telling you her problems, encouraging you to come out of hiding and marry her, and begging you for money to buy her a new yak-shank. Yes, knowing you both so well, I think you are made for each other." "Oh, have mercy, little woodcutter! What can I bribe you with? What do you want to keep her away from me? I've never met such a tormentor as that woman. The Caliph of Baghdad's whip is less dreadful than her nagging tongue." "No, I've quite made up my mind," said Ahmad. "It's been a pleasure knowing you, friend Genie. I'll just go and greet my wife. She has reached the bridge already." "I'm off," said the Genie. "Let no man stand in my way." The body of the Indian princess made 3 somersaults, then cracked like a whip, and the Genie of the well wreathed out through her nose and leapt through the window. "Good day, princess," said Sidi Ahmad to the waking girl. "Let me introduce myself. I am the Prince of China, and your future husband, if you will have me." So it was that a woodcutter with a nagging wife became the Prince of India and China, and the husband of 3 wives. One as fair as the almond tree, another was as sweet as sugar cane, and the third was as biddable, obedient, and silent as a kite on a string. For when Sidi Ahmad sent messengers to the forest near his first little home, and the woodcutter's wife was drawn up in her bucket, the damp surroundings had given her a chill, and she had quite lost her voice. Before it could recover, Ahmad used some of his great wealth to have wells dug in every acre of Ind in China, and ordered his wife's name to be painted on every wooden bucket. People said that Ahmad loved his first wife so deeply that he had wells dug all over Ind in China and painted her name on every wooden bucket to show how her sweetness refreshed his life like a cool drink of water. The woodcutter's wife encouraged this rumor, and perhaps in time she came to believe it herself, but she never nagged her husband again. The Chinese princess and the princes of Ind saw to that. "Will you tell my worthless story to the chancellor?" asked Scheherazade when she had finished the story of the man with 3 wives. It's far too good for him," said Shahryar with a laugh. "If I couldn't rely on the chancellor's wife to keep him in his place, he might start behaving like a prince of China or India." And they laughed and laughed, the 2 of them, until the chancellor came to tell the king that his court was assembled and waiting.